Okay, we are good to go. We are now being recorded and are also live on YouTube. We can get started.
Good morning. Commissioner, do you want to get us started? And OCME, could you turn off the camera?
I have my notes here, but good morning. Let's open up the meeting. I am in White Plains. So I am going to turn over the meeting back to Shelley so that she can run us through the agenda.
Thank you. At this point, we will take attendance by roll call to establish a quorum since we have members in different locations. Please respond present when you hear your name. Lieutenant Colonel Danbury.
Present.
Mr. Castro. Present. Ms. Goldthwait.
Present.
Ms. Rausch.
Present.
Dr. Buffalino.
Present.
Mr. Epstein.
Present by video.
Dr. Marciano.
Present.
Ms. Schmitz.
Present.
Dr. Zithala. Here. Mr. Fitzpatrick. Here. Ms. Murphy.
Present by video.
And Dr. Willie.
Here.
Okay, with that, and including Commissioner Rosado, we do have a quorum this morning. Just for the record, Mr. Fitzpatrick should be joining us momentarily. He just was having some issues logging in at the moment. Up next, we have, everyone should have received an updated agenda. Any discussion regarding the agenda for today's meeting? And with that, is there a motion to approve today's agenda? Dr. Rausch, a second.
Second.
Dr. Buffalino. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. You've also received a draft of the minutes from the June 13th meeting. Are there any questions or comments regarding the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Or anyone abstaining? Okay, Dr. Willie is abstaining. With that, the motion carries. Okay, up next is our executive session. So do I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss matters relating to the current investigation or matters that may lead to the appointment, promotion, demotion, discipline, or suspension of a particular person? Dr. Buffalino, a second?
Second.
Luciano. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Yes.
Okay, let's go for it. Any abstentions? With that, the motion carries. At this point, if you are not a member of the commission or staff, you'll be expelled from the virtual meeting, and the streaming will be paused. We will resume the stream when executive session has ended. Thank you.
Okay, we are now recording on Zoom and also live on YouTube.
At this point, we have everyone back at the table. Commissioner Murphy seems to be, she'll turn her camera on when she's back. And we are back in open session. So after a thorough discussion in executive session and a comprehensive investigation regarding an anonymous complaint to the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Division of Forensic Biology, which was included in delays in the response to requests for information, the commission and its working group will be sending a letter to the OCME regarding the importance of effective management to support technical services in public forensic laboratories, including, but not limited to, outside employment policies and practices. For awareness, this letter will also be sent to all public forensic laboratories in New York State. At this point, we're going to move into the accreditation and laboratory updates section of our agenda. And all of today's updates are for informational purposes. So there are no votes. Right. And there were no other actions taken in the executive session. Okay, so with that, our first laboratory up is the Monroe County Crime Laboratory. In April, ANAB conducted a surveillance assessment activity. There were no findings, and ANAB has issued a continuation of accreditation based on the results of the assessment activity. We do have people virtual. If there are any questions for the laboratory. Seeing none. We have the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Toxicology. The laboratory notified DCJS that quality manager Elba Arango has returned from an extended leave and resumed her role as of August 18th. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Okay. The New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Forensic Anthropology Unit, DCJS, and ANAB have been notified of the official appointment of Dr. Angela Solar to the Director of Forensic Anthropology. Previously, this was an interim appointment, so this is official. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Next is the New York City Police Department Latent Print Section. In July, ANAB conducted a surveillance assessment activity. There were no findings. ANAB has issued a continuation of accreditation based on the results of that activity. The laboratory has also notified DCJS and ANAB that Sergeant Russell McLeod will be serving as interim director of the latent print section following Lieutenant Dowdy's retirement. The CV has been provided for your review. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Up next, the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory. In August, ANAB conducted a full reassessment. There were no findings. The lab is currently waiting to receive their final documentation from ANAB. The commission will vote on New York State accreditation at the December meeting. After the receipt of the documents, OFS will forward those to the DNA subcommittee's review at their November meeting. So we'll be back on the agenda. Any questions for the lab at this point? Westchester County Department of Labs and Research, Division of Forensic Services. In June, the lab underwent a surveillance assessment activity and there were no findings. But one opportunity for improvement was suggested. At the time of the activity, if an amended report was issued, only certain amendments required the reason for the change to be included in the report. The assessor felt that the lab may benefit from requiring all amended reports to state the reason for the change. So it clearly is understood by the intended reader. It should be noted that the recommendations such as these require no action by the laboratory. ANAB has issued their continuation of accreditation documents. Any questions for the laboratory? The Westchester County Department of Labs and Research, Division of Forensic Toxicology. The lab has notified DCJS that Eliza Spideri has returned to the laboratory and will resume her role as the Quality Assurance Manager following training. The lab will notify DCJS and ANAB once the training has been completed, and Ms. Spideri will assume her role. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Westchester County Department of Public Safety Crime Laboratory. In June, ANAB conducted a surveillance assessment activity. There was one finding related to ISO 1705, 2017, 7.10.1. Does the laboratory have a procedure that is implemented when any aspect of its laboratory activities or results of this work do not conform to its own procedure? The lab did not address a disclosure in accordance with its non-conforming policies and procedures. In response to the finding, updates to the Quality Assurance Manual, Quality Issues Reporting Form, and Corrective Action Request Form were made and submitted to ANAB. The corrective actions were approved, and the laboratory is awaiting their final documents from ANAB. Are there any questions for the laboratory today? No. Okay. The New York City Police Department Police Laboratory, in September, the laboratory underwent a remote activity for a scope extension to add a software program to their key equipment and technology used for physical comparison of ammunition in the firearms and tool mark discipline. There were no findings, and the laboratory has received their final documents for the scope extension from ANAB. There's no vote required for this, as it's not a new discipline, it's just an additional technology to an existing discipline. I do see Aaron's hand is up. Oh. Nope, okay. Any questions for the laboratory?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I believe we have the quality manager available and assistant lab director. Now,
Hello, good morning.
good morning. Morning.
I also have Stephanie O'Shea in the office with me, our quality assurance manager.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
I just had a question about your scope extension. I was just trying to get a handle on what new method or software you were bringing on board that would justify the scope or need a scope extension. Is it software that you're seeking to get the scope extension for?
Yes, it's for the Cadre Top Match 3D software and equipment.
And could you explain what that does?
Yes, so what we are using it for is to perform NIBIN triage of cartridge cases recovered from crime scenes. That's a step that we currently perform doing class characteristic evaluations using stereo microscope. And using this technology, we are able to, use as an additional tool to screen those cartridge cases for NIBIN acquisition.
Are other labs in the country using that same software?
Yes.
Do you know how many? Is it widely used or?
I don't have an exact number. I'm aware of at least one other lab that's using it for that purpose. There are other laboratories that are using it for actual microscopic comparison work, including the FBI.
And you're currently in the process of validating the software?
For microscopic comparisons?
Yes, to bring it online or?
Well, we performed a validation for this function of triaging cartridge cases, and that was what was part of the evaluation by ANAB when they came for the assessment for the scope extension.
Are you also validating it for the microscopic comparisons?
Yes, we are currently underway with that validation.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the laboratory? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. That will take us to the next section of our agenda, which is old business. The first item is a familial search update. So I have the data to share with you. Since our June meeting, we've had 6 new applications received, 4 initial applications and 2 renewals. 3 applications have been approved and 4 searches have been completed, 3 with no result and 1 with a result released. So that brings our totals to 80 applications in total, 62 initial, 10 renewals, and 8 resubmissions. 60 have been approved, 3 have been withdrawn, 13 rejected, and 4 in review stage. Of the approved 60, there are 11 currently in the search queue. 49 searches have been completed, 37 with no releasable results, 12 with results released. And there are 4 ongoing investigations and 8 closed investigations. Okay. Updates from the subcommittee. So in response to requests from the commission, the DNA subcommittee has provided responses to both the NIST DNA mixed interpretation report and the NIST Human Factors Report. Are there any discussions on these two responses? And I think probably there are. So maybe we break it down by starting with the mixture interpretation as a separate entity. That's the first set of documents, the first response you have, and then we have the human factors. Are there any comments or questions or discussion regarding the mixture interpretation letter?
Yes.
Yes. Erin, do you want to go first and then Justin?
Sure. So I'll just start by saying, I was actually kind of disappointed in the response here, partly the tone, which sort of seemed, which maybe is unfair when, but the tone sort of seemed to be like, oh, there's nothing new. We're sort of doing all this already. It's all great. And I was surprised to see that, both because, I tend to value NIST and think that they do really good work. And so the fact that they wrote this extensive report, it strikes me as implausible that we're actually, on top of all of this stuff. I think it seems likely that they had some really important insights that we could use and apply forward at our labs, but also because our flagship lab is in the midst of a massive issue related to something that I think of as DNA 101, which is don't do high template and low template cases at the same bench, and make sure you're doing really extensive cleaning between cases. And that to me is a pretty 101. I mean, I know 10 years ago, I knew that. And so the idea that like this huge report came out and there was nothing much we could learn strikes me as not correct. So I guess the first thing is just it didn't feel like they were engaging with this report at the level I would have hoped to have seen. I have a kind of point by point thing, which maybe isn't productive to go through right now, but a meta question I had, that I was taking away that I wasn't really sure, is to the extent that they did agree with recommendations, it wasn't clear to me what they viewed their role to be in transmitting that down to labs. We know lab directors are incredibly busy. They may not have time to read this report as thoroughly as the DNA subcommittee would. They don't have the benefit of the committee's structure to kind of bounce, ideas about how it might apply to their labs. And so it struck me that what I was hoping the DNA subcommittee would do with this report would be to read it, to think very carefully about each of the suggestions and how it might apply in different lab settings, a large lab versus a small lab, a rural lab versus a urban lab, in New York State, and then, make a pretty thorough set of guidances, recommendations, or thoughts that they could then send to lab directors to say, hey, here's the parts that you really should pay attention to and think about. So I think that's my goal. If that seems like something that can't happen, then I think we should think about how better to digest this information for our labs, to the extent that it could happen. And I'm just misunderstanding the committee's own, thoughts about what's the next step. But it would be helpful maybe if anyone has insights on what they were imagining comes next.
I guess I should back up a step, and my apologies, just for some background here. What our office did to help facilitate there, and what the subcommittee had done. There were two specific working groups, and they divided themselves up and met weekly, sometimes more than weekly, with our staff, providing that logistical support to get them present. Council sat in on the meetings, so each working group was digesting the material, I think, and I was trying to pull up the letter that was sent to them. I think they were operating under the commission has asked us to look at this thing. What are we? They're reviewing it. This is their review. If there are more specific questions, I think, Erin, if you're looking for more like digesting it down to that urban lab or rural lab, maybe that needed to be clarified. I don't think the guidance that was given to them was to that level. And so maybe there is a second step here. What we had asked initially was just to a written statement regarding the document. I think that's the extent of what was asked of them.
Just want to make one quick comment. I absolutely respect NIST and everything they stand for and their opinions. But I think it's also important to remember that the DNA subcommittee is made up of some of the most world and nationally renowned experts in DNA. So I respect their opinions equally as NIST. So, and a lot of them probably have worked with NIST on some of these things. So I think we should weight their opinion, at least I am, as much as I would weight NIST's in this case. I think that's important to point out.
And that's why it's so alarming that there's disagreement, right? Because they are the scientific advisory committee in the state of New York, and they are disagreeing with NIST on some of the points, not all of the points, of course. But I think that is absolutely alarming and reflects a lack of consensus maybe in the community about certain topics.
That's fair, yeah.
I do share Erin's comments. I was also sort of troubled. I mean, look, it was a very difficult endeavor to hand someone this hugely comprehensive report that went through an extensive public comments period, incorporated those public comments, and then this final report was issued in December 24. And then for the DNA subcommittee to sort of tackle that. And as Erin described, what we would hope maybe is that to take these recommendations and see how they can be used to improve the quality of work that New York labs are doing, or to ensure that New York labs are in accordance with what's generally accepted as the best way to do this stuff in the scientific community. I'm concerned there are some misleading things in this document. I don't think they're deliberately misleading, but because this is a very short document, it's intended to be a summary, but without additional context or discussion, I'm worried that it's simply misleading. So, for instance, the subcommittee, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of sort of the history of how this or came to be over the course of literally years, because the NIST draft came out, several years or a couple years before the final report. And the subcommittee sat down to do its task. But my understanding is DCJS or OFS collected internal validations for the labs in the state, for the DNA labs, and provided those maybe protocols as well to the subcommittee for review. Now, there is a line in here, which is what I'm particularly concerned about, that says, the subcommittee confirms that New York State Public Labs using PG have conducted extensive validations encompassing multiple mixture scenarios. That's great to hear. I haven't seen them myself, but that is good. But I'm worried that it's misleading, because what NIST made very clear, and I think, just as an aside, we should probably hear from NIST itself, the authors of this report. But what is critical is that there's empirical justification, empirical work during the validation studies that supports the reliable use for the case at hand. So simply saying this sort of broad statement that the validation is extensive and that many mixture scenarios have been conducted, don't doubt it on its face, but that's insufficient to ensure some sort of baseline belief, or to provide, I guess, the court and stakeholders with the information they need to evaluate whether the use of a particular method in a particular case is reliable. And I think that was the entire point of NIST, is move away from these sweeping statements like, oh, you validated, great. It's just a very minimum requirement. And I think time and again, we're seeing, labs grappling with very complex samples. We have one coming up later where there was a case with related individuals in a 3-person mixture that was low template. I think everyone here agrees that is a challenging sample, and the lab has taken steps to investigate how they dealt with that sample, and I think have forthrightly admitted it was challenging. So I think that point got lost. Also, there was a statement in this letter, and I'd just like to confirm whether or not it's true, that validations are reviewed both by the subcommittee and by auditors. My understanding is the only reason the subcommittee got the star mix or complex mixture validations is because we required them to get them by vote back in, 2021, 22. Otherwise, they weren't going to get them. I understand by statute, any novel methodology involving a DNA method must be sent to the DNA subcommittee, which would certainly encompass an internal validation. But it's unclear what that means in terms of when a new version of StarMix or other probabilistic genotyping system is brought online. But I think we need to be clear that my understanding, I could be wrong, is that the only reason the subcommittee got those validations is because we required it by a special vote to ensure that they got them. The second thing is the claim that auditors review validation studies. Sure, I mean, my understanding, and I know we have auditors here, and I know Pam Sale has come and spoken to this subcommittee from ANAB, and I'd welcome hearing from her again. But my understanding is an auditor will go in with a checklist of QAS standards or ANAB standards and ensure that certain critically important studies were conducted. You know, you got your sensitivity, you got your specificity, all those are obviously critical, but it's essentially a checklist to make sure that these studies were conducted and it's not passing on perhaps the rigor of the validation more than that. So I'm a little concerned that that sweeping statement could be misinterpreted, but I invite a conversation with Pam Sell, or if other, commission members can speak to the limited role that auditors have with respect to reviewing a validation. It's an important role, but it's not the be all end all. But I'm just worried that, the fundamental points that were being articulated in the NIST report are being lost by this very summary and dismissive in some ways letter from our subcommittee. So I think it's concerning.
Bill, your hand's up.
Yeah. First, before I comment on it, first a question: what are we doing here relative to the NIST report and the DNA subcommittee response? Just academically debating it, or are we going to take some action, or is that up to us?
I believe that's up to the group. This started so long ago, I don't know that.
Okay. All right. Well, then let me I'll make some quick comments. I thought the DNA subcommittee response was muted. I read this NIST report, and I mean, there's some things in there that are patently obvious. Where there should be better training, more money. Great. Okay. That's a great recommendation. But there's a lot of things in here that have nothing to do whatsoever with science. For example, 4.2 and 4.3. The likelihood ratio should be limited to one figure, 1 in a billion. Where'd that come from? So Jessica at trial can say, ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution may have 20 loci match here, but there are 8 other people on the planet Earth that could have committed this horrible crime. I mean, this is, where did that come from? Why 1 in a billion? It reminds me of Jim Carrey thinking that he's going to date Lauren Holly, and she says more like 1 in a million. So he says, so there's still a chance. Give the likelihood ratio values for what they are, what they've been scientifically shown to be. Then 4.5, don't use terms like match, included, consistent with. What is it? Is the analyst supposed to say, this DNA, which matches that defendant at 20 loci, may have come from him? Good luck. And then this is one of my favorite. The evaluation of the DNA comparison cannot conclusively identify an individual as the source of the DNA. Really?
Yeah. Really.
1 in 6 quadrillion. It's not his DNA. It's not her DNA. The report does not provide any information about how or when the DNA was deposited. That sounds like it's written by a defense lawyer. I mean, is NIST telling Steve and Jessica and my colleagues and friends in the defense bar how to do their jobs? The report does not provide any information about how or when the DNA was deposited. How about adding, if it's ridiculous enough to put that in the report, how about adding, although please understand that just because the defendant's semen was found in the body of this 5-year-old girl doesn't mean that he's the one that strangled her so she couldn't be a witness. Is that what the reports are going to, scientific reports? We need NIST to do this? DNA, here's a good one too. They want the reports to say DNA results are only part of the overall case. Well, I convicted a guy with only DNA. He's sitting in state prison. Luckily, that wasn't in the DNA report that Russ Geddick filed, or the guy probably would have been acquitted. DNA analysts should not opine about the possibility or probability of direct or indirect transfer. Why not? We all know that DNA went from voodoo in the 90s to the gold standard at the turn of the century. And now it's just another factor in the long labyrinth of reasonable doubts that we may tend to create. And now the cause du jour is multiple contributors to a community gun, and the person who is driving the car that the gun was found under, and his DNA is on the gun. Well, it was transferred from the trooper that arrested him, even though the trooper was wearing gloves that he just took out of his evidence box. Why can't an analyst testify about the absurdity of transfer in a situation like that? I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but again, this is a defense primer. Steve and Jessica don't need lessons on how to argue transfer, and they don't need an ally from some NIST report. A lot of the rest of it has to do with training. Not to forget the creation of 2 new separate federal agencies regarding DNA. What could possibly go wrong with that? A lot of it has to do with micromanaging how a lab should be run. I don't see, a lot of science, wellness of the staff. I need NIST to tell my lab directors that they should make sure their staff are well treated, that they don't have a lot of noise in the laboratory. So I don't know, again, what we're supposed to do here, but I thought the DNA subcommittee response was very direct and frankly, very muted and very polite. When I read stuff like that, I don't put much credence in the report.
Pat, I saw your hand up next.
Yeah, because I want to make sure that, I guess for the lab director's sake, because I mean, things have been said that it's not that I agree or disagree. I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. So one of the things that was stated was, with these additional recommendations, right? The laboratory the low level, right? We all know we're not supposed to have low and high level on the same bench, right? It's in ANEB's guidelines. It's in the AR document. It's in the QAS document. Sometimes the laboratory doesn't know. Just because it's a low level sample doesn't mean it's not going to have a gram of, and I'm being obviously a little over the top, but that doesn't mean it's not going to have a gram of DNA. So sometimes I understand that it's a big topic, but we don't know. We've known forever. I mean, it's clearly stated things have to be kept separate. Our janitorial staff goes in one way, goes out the other way, never comes back. So clearly written guidelines for it. Getting back to the validations, I'm sure you're aware that all validations are reviewed twice until they're closed out, right? You have your assessment, they review it, right? And then on the next assessment, we've only had this one reviewed once, we need to review a second time. So they get looked at twice by different audit teams. In terms of the and I'm just going by auditing labs myself. These records are given to the audit staff in advance, months in advance, and depending on the laboratory. I mean, if the laboratory wants to submit a week before the inspection, they can. But I know that I've been given the proper time to go through validation studies, the ones that I'm capable and qualified to review. So they are being reviewed. I don't want to be like, oh, well, they're not really being reviewed because it hasn't been out to the world to review. So they have been reviewed. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have the opportunity to review it. I'm just being clear that there are measures being taken. The last thing was the use of AI and so forth. I talked about the low level. I think that, and I'm not going to name the laboratory, the situation in that case, had the laboratory looked at the diagnostics, they would have known not to use that run, and they should have run it again. I think they're pretty clear to say, hey, we've noticed that the log of the likelihood ratio was negative 1.8, which we all know needs to be over 20 in order for it to be reviewable. So there are some checkpoints in the AI systems, right, that when something's not intuitive, a red flag does go up. So there were just certain things that I wanted to clarify, that there are fail safes that are in here. There are already documents stating how we should set our labs up. And in my opinion, I appreciated the memo that was written, because it does support the labs. We do go out, we look at SWIG, ASTM, OSAC, you know, the European standards. So, you know, I don't want it to out to the public to think that the labs aren't trying to achieve this gold standard that, you know, we're looking for. Can we do better? Yeah, of course, all of us in this room can do better. But I think we're putting the work that's necessary in there to make sure that the products that we're using are going to pass the inspection and so forth. And defense muster also.
I just want to add one thing, on Pat's point about, reviewing validations. Something that we've seen through we see everything from A&AB. If they don't have someone who is technically capable of reviewing a new technology, they search for that, and we've seen delayed activities because they need to find the proper expert to review a validation study. So A&AB does take care that they have the right people reviewing. I don't mean to speak for them, but we've seen the email traffic back and forth on that point. So they do make it important, a priority to find the right people. Mike, I saw your hand come up. Do you have no?
My only, thought would have been the DNA subcommittee could have recommended specific modifications to our guidance and expectations. And I agree, some of their, well, we don't need to do that, or we can't do that, or we disagree with doing, and others where they say, yes, we agree. Well, so are there specific changes that they would recommend based on these reports? But I mean, that's just a question back to the committee. Thank you for your report, thank you for your everything, but what are we supposed to do with it? Was my takeaway. I don't know. Interesting comments, frustrating comments, some of them. Not knowing exactly what the labs are doing and what the standards are. Are there specific recommendations that they would make for changes?
And in their defense, in terms of not agreeing or being opposed, some of these standards don't have 100%, and they'll tell you, like, only 60% of the people agreed to this one, so we put it out. So, and I can see that there's a little kind of like, I don't agree with this, especially when there isn't a consensus within the standard, the recommendation itself. Like, there should be a consensus before it goes out. It should be 100% of the people, unless the people who are voting no shouldn't even be voting on the topic to begin with, right? If they're not educated in it and so on. So
I do want to just mention, we did ask them to do a review, right? We didn't ask them to make recommendations directly.
Exactly.
So I think that's an important takeaway. Also, in the document, there are suggestions, which I'll mention later in a follow-up topic, but about looking at ASB 040 and sending things to the BioTwig for their review and things like that. So there are statements in there that are suggestions, but if we want recommendations, then we probably should ask for recommendations. The other thing is, with the human factors report, it's a good report, but there are many parts of it that are very controversial in the community. There's other parts, a lot of it, in fact, is not controversial. It's good practice, but there are some parts that are controversial, and that's just part of this.
And I wouldn't criticize them for not having given us recommendations. That's not what we asked for.
Right.
I'm just saying, that said, what are we doing here? What are we doing?
Yeah, then that's fair.
Okay, is a next step to go back to the committee and say, okay, thanks for your review. Now, are there any specific that we're missing out on? Because we've already got a lot, but would you recommend any changes or additions? that are established in the literature that are not controversial. And we appreciate your continued future assessments, as this process is not going to end.
Mhm.
The efforts to create new technology with AI and to do this probabilistic making data out of nothing, I'm sorry, but if you don't understand the algorithms, that most of us don't, it's making data out of nothing. You know, it's not going to change. It's going to evolve over time.
I don't know about the making data out of nothing, but MCMC just
Some of
makes
them are pretty
predictions and then
close.
moves forward.
I see Aaron's hand is up.
Yeah, so one thing is I think we have kind of alluded to the human factors piece, but I had kind of stuck to the mixtures piece. I don't know if we're blending the two, but I did have some thoughts on the human factors piece too. So I retract my accusation that they didn't. If it was not obvious, or if we should specifically say, then I am absolutely in favor of making clear that at least what I would want to see is essentially this premier body of experts engaging with the report by another distinguished body of experts and making plain to people on the ground who maybe don't have the bandwidth to engage that deeply or the expertise in-house to engage the recommendations, to make clear if there are points of clear agreement, like this is obvious and our expectation is your labs are all doing this. This is more challenging and we expect these kinds of labs maybe to be able to implement this, and for others it might be more aspirational. These are things that we flat out disagree with and we don't think and don't expect your lab to do. I think when that happens, it would also be very helpful to have a clear understanding about why, because as the point has been made, these are two very distinguished bodies. So why the point of disagreement? Is it about the conclusion? Is it about the realities of what it is to have a crime lab on the ground? What is the reason? And for things where, for instance, there are recommendations about slipping to, I think, some of the human factors about further work that needs to be done or ways of being forward thinking. I would like for this DNA subcommittee to be that forward thinking body, and whether they're using their position to ask the state advisory groups to do certain work, or whether they're themselves, many of them I know are on these kind of bodies that could do that type of work. I think the point is not to let the work of this report, or these two reports, I guess, just sort of die in a library. Like these are meant to engage with the actual practices of crime laboratories in a forward thinking 21st century context, and I would hope that they would. And if I just had to extract a couple points that I think are critical, I very much agree with what Jessica said about some of the conclusory statements. So do I think our labs are doing validation? I think that's hopefully obvious, and they all are, and it's excellent. Am I concerned that sometimes the actual testing that occurs in labs goes beyond the validated parameters? Yes, I'm very concerned about that. Do I think it's always crystal clear that that's happening, or when it is happening that it's communicated? Yes, I'm concerned about that. And so that's something that, we could hear what they say. Do they say, like, occasionally you might have to go beyond your validated parameters and that's fine, but you should disclose it? Or did they say you should make absolutely clear you never go beyond those parameters, et cetera? When we're thinking about software acquisition and so forth, I also think we could imagine statements about vendors and preferences of vendors that prioritize some of the values that were listed, for instance, in the human factors report. If you're choosing as a lab director between two vendors of software, one of which does independent, validation and verification, and one of which doesn't, one of which maybe is more open source or is available for research, and one of which is not, I think we could have a statement that says, when making that choice, choose the ones that seem to embody scientific values and scientific practice, to the extent that you can, do so, understanding there might be other concerns, costs, et cetera, in mind. Similarly, you have a statement in this report that says proficiency tests should have complex fixtures being tested as part of the proficiency tests. We may not have the capacity in our state to develop those tests, but we also are a consumer of proficiency tests. And so if we as a consumer of proficiency tests can say to our vendors, your proficiency tests on complex mixtures are insufficiently sophisticated, and we are, we need to have mixtures that better represent the day-to-day ground truth of lab work that's being done. Or this is another area where we're not seeing our proficiency tests match what we're actually asking of our analysts and casework. So we would like you to work on that. Again, these are not necessarily things that are going to happen with the snap of a finger, but I think we should be taking them seriously and doing what we can as the sort of overseeing body of our own labs to ensure that we're not going to downstream run into a problem where analysts are being asked to work on things that they really aren't trained for properly, or we haven't identified shortcomings in the training because the sort of structure of the way that we're testing and hiring and training, et cetera, don't match that. So again, I have other things. I don't want to belabor it because I don't think a point by point now is necessarily productive, but that's the level at which I would hope we would see them engage. And so I guess the final thing I'll say is that that's what I would ask us to ask of them, to take these two reports and engage with them at a level that can surface the areas of disagreement and the reasons for it, the areas of agreement where we assume the labs are doing it. So if you're a director and you read it, you can say, oh, they're assuming I'm doing something I'm actually not doing. And then the areas where maybe they're not sure if labs are doing it or not, but they want to make sure labs should aspire to or do it if they can.
I agree with that. That's sort of what they did already too. I mean, they did say, we believe most New York State labs are doing this. It's the recommendation that they review this set of standards. But if you're looking for a firmer, more of a description, and I agree it was brief, but it was a long document, then maybe we could ask them that in those instances, what they disagree on, why, give us more context for that. Or maybe what they feel strongly on. So I'm supporting what Aaron's saying, but also they did briefly talk about.
Right, weren't they clear about like when they were disagreeing?
Yeah,
They did
but
give an
it would be
explanation
good
as
to know why, right? More. They have more context. I mean, I'm a DNA guy, so I understand that a little more, but other people may not. There are a bunch of DNA folks here.
I brought this up a few times, and I think this just gets kicked down the road, but maybe now we're here. Why don't we hear from the authors of these studies? DA Fitzpatrick's litany of rhetorical questions, some of which are truly frightening, can be addressed by these committees. And it's disappointing that the DNA subcommittee wasn't clearer about why there's so much controversy about activity level propositions and why there is so much controversy about whether there can be a probability of the evidence given to competing activity level propositions. So remember, like, all the science is done and then it goes in DA Fitzpatrick's hands and it goes in Steve and my hands. We defend clients and DA Fitzpatrick prosecutes them. So it's also important that this gets communicated to us and the public in a clearer way. And this very summary response is just not doing it. Do I make a motion? But I really suggest that we hear from these groups, or at least a subcommittee does. I don't see why we all don't. Maybe a joint meeting. I don't know.
Are you asking just for informational purposes to better understand it?
Yeah.
As a forensic community or as a commission?
Well, that's a good question. How about both? That's a good question. I mean, both, really, right?
Yeah, because I think if it's for the forensic community, that's beyond us.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But part of our statutory mission is to sort of promote understanding among stakeholders. I mean, I know what you mean, but like, that is part of our statutory mission as a commission. And I'm alarmed at the questions, and I think the scientists in this room are probably also alarmed at some of those questions that DA Fitzpatrick asked. So I think we need to hear from the authors of the report.
we bring this to the subcommittee, the concerns we're hearing today, and determine if they're available to do a joint meeting to fill you in on what they did and their background.
We do like a special session or
Or
we wait for December?
attend December, to see if that
December meeting?
guest appearance.
Guest appearance on, virtually, we could do it as part of that meeting. It wouldn't be like an extra meeting for them, they would just be visiting our meeting.
An invitation from the commission to the subcommittee to further discuss their review of the NIST report.
And if you have specific points that you'd like addressed, I think it would be helpful to us.
Yes.
So we can present that to them.
Yeah.
At this point, you also have sent some information regarding a specific item in the human factors. We've kind of bled into both documents at this point. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I don't know if anybody wants to.
So the human factors suggestions mentioned a lot of documents and standards related to OSAC, ASB. And one of the things that I want to put forward is a potential plan, not just to focus on DNA, but to focus on all the disciplines that would continue the state's commitment to the high quality forensic science, but also evolve with the changing landscape that we see. And the plan that I included is meant to put the choice of the standards and the recommendations in the hands of the laboratories, choose what are appropriate and relevant based on the size and staffing levels to ensure that lab operations and just day-to-day work have minimal disruptions and accommodate the various wide-ranging diversity and resources of labs in the state. And these OSAC standards are administered by NIST, and the group started in 2016 and are made of over 800 volunteer members that are forensic scientists from across the country in public and private labs. There are human factors people, statistics experts. And so the plan that I would like to propose for discussion would be an adoption of a certain number of discipline-specific OSAC standards, a certain number by each discipline per year per laboratory, where these standards would be adopted at the discretion of the laboratory. That would include OSAC proposed or SDO published standards. I can go into that if there's any questions. And the purpose in letting the labs choose, you would essentially, have them control their own operations. The maximum number of standards would be 3 in this case. I made a little equation here.
Where did that equation come from?
His head.
Yeah.
It came from your head?
It came from my head, yeah.
Can you help us understand that?
Yes.
Can we understand what's in your head?
So the maximum number is 3 standards. So if your proportion level of staffing and your FTE.
What is proportion level of staffing?
So if if you're fully staffed, right? If you have half staff. So if you have a section that has 5 full-time employees, right? But you have 5 open positions, your level of staffing is 50%. I'm just putting this forward for discussion. The few things that I would ask is for feedback in December, and to ask BCJS if they'd be willing to ask laboratories about this and get their feedback, and then potentially and preferably have someone from the OSAC main office join us to help educate and answer questions in December.
So I have a couple comments.
Okay, I see a couple hands, yeah, Michelle and then Pat, and then
Okay.
Aaron.
So I think one thing that I would ask to reconsider is the proposed standards. Those are essentially draft documents, and we all know those do change. I think there are enough published documents for labs to review. I don't think labs should spend time addressing proposed standards until they're actually published. As far as the FTEs, the full-time examiners, your proposed calculation looks beautiful on paper, but I think the reality is things aren't always as easy in real life. So you may have 5 full-time examiners, but maybe you have some on medical leave, or maybe you're going through an audit, or maybe they're still in training, or maybe they're in retraining, or maybe there's an inventory unexpectedly that needs to be performed and it takes analysts out, or maybe there's a major trial they're preparing.
Sure.
All of these are things that are real world situations for us. So to say that I have maybe 3 full-time examiners in this section, maybe only one of them is actually focused on casework at a time because there are 2 doing other things or whatever it may be. And this is just the reality. So I ask this to be taken into consideration because, to say that somebody is fully staffed in a section doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to take on additional non-mandated or mandated work on top of what is already being done. And then the last comment I have, where you have listed the relevant issues that you feel we need to consider. We're talking about maybe hearing from OSAC and to answer questions, but we are here to support labs, and I think it's equally important that we hear from laboratories and hear their questions and their concerns.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that.
And maybe it's not just laboratories, maybe it's the technical, the disciplines themselves. I don't know in the state, I think there are some lab directors that have concerns, but I also think there are technical sections that have concerns because some of these OSAC guidelines, I prefer guidelines over standards, but these guidelines or recommendations aren't necessarily written in such a way that are always good practices or best practices.
Well, in here, the partial implementation is definitely something that could be done. But also, if there's a reason not to, and this is why I want to bring it for discussion, if there is a reason not to implement something because of X reasons, then that, to me, is completely valid, right? Regarding the equation, that was a starting point. The maximum number of standards is 3 per year. And if that needs to be changed, that's, that would be absolutely fine with me. This is just bringing it forward to get this discussion going, because there are already labs that are implementing within the state, or they're listed on the OSAC website already. And all this would do is just ensure the quality of work going forward. And I want to make very, very, I want to make a point that this is not a condemnation or questioning of the quality of work being done in New York State, because all labs are accredited that demonstrate their adherence to the high quality standards. But this would just show the commitment, the continued commitment to maintaining quality and being updated with what is going on nationally in the forensic community.
So are you saying you want labs to get on the registry to demonstrate that, or just to say we've adopted the best practices?
That's not for me to say. I mean, I'm completely comfortable with saying the labs should decide how to do this.
Okay. Because I think the last time you brought this up, I had shared with the commission that labs are reviewing this. Labs are in different phases. Some are doing gap analysis, some have reviewed and adopted or realize they have already included best practices in their SOPs. And again, these are guidelines for labs, much like many other documents that are out there that we use is guidelines. So that commitment still continues with labs. So I guess I'm a little unclear where you're expecting this to go, or what we're doing that you feel isn't strong enough right now.
This would be demonstrating that the labs are adhering to those. That's all. So it's another level, right? These are discipline specific. So if you're already doing it, why wouldn't you say you're, you know, why not?
So how do you envision that?
I think that's not a discussion.
Yes, we're doing this.
That's not a discussion maybe that we could have today. Maybe we can, but that would be up to the commission, NIPLAC, twigs, whatever it is. I mean, that's not something that I could propose in this case, because I'm not operational.
Pat, do you have your comment, or should I go to Aaron?
Yeah, so one thing is, and I came prepared today just to, and I know other New York State labs are doing either the same or close to the same thing, because we've been asked 3 times, 2001, 2023, 2025, I just did it on my own. I did another gap analysis. And I forget a partial implementation, because that just, the word partial implementation to me, I don't like that, right? You're either going to, right, in A and AB, you can't partially deal with a standard. I don't like the second half of the standard, but I like the first half, right? So I'm not even gonna talk about the partial implementations. Again, we're over 90% following this document inadvertently, and I have X's and O's now,
Exactly.
right? I have statistics and everything else. Of the 4 that we chose not to, and I think someone said it, we have a better way. The interdisciplinary, my QA director said, honestly, I think the way that we approach this is better than their recommendation. Firearms, right? Who would measure 2 lengths and choose the average? That's not how we support defense community. We take the lower, right? You put drugs on a scale and you weigh it 3 times. You don't take the average, you take the lowest, right? So I don't personally agree with those either. But to let you know, I mean, there was another one in latent prints about minimizing examination, right? So the 4 red ones, in my opinion, we're doing something better, and I have no interest. You know, why not SWIG? Why not ASTM? Why not the others? I mean, I live by SWIG. I live by the European standards for chem, ASTM, right? No one's mentioning any of those. Like, why aren't we saying, look, the SWIG documents, right? We're given all this time to review it. We're given all this time to comment, whereas an OSAC, the time is limited, right? I'm lucky if I find out if there's a new proposed one there in time before it turns into a recommendation. So just in 2001, just to let you know, because I don't want people to think in this state that lab directors aren't, and again, I should speak for myself. In 2001, we had best practice for standard 7 and 4 for DNA, right? One standard for interpretation, one is recommendations for the management of quality assurance DNA elimination databases, right? So those were 2 new proposed ones in 2001. The first person said, essentially, and to paraphrase the 2 separate people, yeah, we looked into it. We're already doing this. Here's how we write it. We're following NEB, AR, whatever the standard is. My issue is this: if we're going to introduce, and I'm not saying force standards, because I believe that we have, as a lab director, right? I think with the system that we have in place, especially with QAS and all the other recommendations that we have, including OSAC, because I'm not avoiding OSAC, and we look at these standards. You know, I don't see how it's going to make the product better. And I'm gonna use an example, and I hope that this doesn't get me in trouble, but we had a lab in New York State that wasn't doing very well, right? We didn't think they understood the standards. We got them help. We sent people in. The new lab director sitting right here. He got a perfect inspection after he went through the standards that he needed to go through, right? He was transparent, and boom, 100%. And you know what, Dr. Westring, excellent job. I don't even mind putting you on the spot. I mean, they followed the recommendations that were in house, and at the same time, right? I'm sure you have OSAC standards. I'm sure you have SWIG standards. I have SWIG DNA standards buried in my document, in my SOPs for statistics. I am never going to take anyone else's suggestions unless I'm forced to do it on statistics. I think SWIG is the best source. It's just an opinion. It's an opinion. I've been hearing lately that like ANEB inspection is not a technical inspection. And I started laughing. I said to myself, what lab director in this room is going to agree that ANEB is not a technical assessment? Is ANEB a technical assessment, or is it just management? It's a technical assessment. I'm sitting here, we don't get to cherry pick our cases. They come in, they say, give us some database that generates random numbers, and then give us those cases. I didn't go in there and I pulled cases. I'm trying to do it as independent as possible. So, I don't think more is better. I think you have to adhere to what we have here. We have a perfect example sitting in this room of what can happen to a lab when they follow the rules, right? They're back into compliance. I hope life is great in Niagara County for everybody, for your criminal justice system, but that's my speech. But if anyone, I don't want to give out my spreadsheet because, it's got some personal comments about some of the standards that I would need to kind of, deal with. Redactions, right? Redactions. Right. I don't want anybody to think that I'm just I put X's in a box. I mean, we actually did this. When I came back from retirement, on vacation, I came back from retirement. That's what I did. I tasked myself with it, and it took 3.5 weeks. And in the end, one of my examiners said, well, obviously we're complying with all this already. It doesn't seem like there's enough product there for the amount of work that goes into it because we're already doing it. If everybody wants me to stamp OSAC 4.3, OSAC 2.6 next to the ANEB and SWIG number, fine, I'll do it. If you want recognition, I'll do it. But I'm just a little concerned that the other groups are not being brought into this discussion, like the SWIGs, the AFTI, and everything else that we've been using, including the OSAC standards. Right? So I'm not against them. I'm just saying I hate when people say that, lab directors are not, they're not looking into these things. Right? There was one that came, and I agree.
That was never said.
What's
the
that?
lab directors aren't looking into it. At least here.
Okay. All right.
No, we at the NICLAC group meetings, we've talked a lot about these for years, and the technical working groups have talked about, and labs have incorporated, the best practices and discussed what isn't a best practice or what practice they have found to be the best practice. These are absolutely documents that have been incorporated, but to Pat's point, so have other documents. So I don't know if this is about a stamp look, we're following these, but I feel like these have been embraced at various levels by various labs for years.
Then again, why not state that, right? Why not,
Well, that's the point. If you want me to stamp it on my SOP, I'll do it.
Well, I think that's a great thing. But the human factors report from the DNA subcommittee specifically recommends OSAC standards in there, right? So it's not, it's not just coming from me.
Aren't they the same organization though?
What would you say?
Aren't they the same organization?
No, the DNA subcommittee included it in their recommendation.
I thought you said.
Yeah. So this is a short, note that this is 3 standards a year maximum, right? I mean, this is not meant to be laborious. It's easy for me to say because I'm not a lab director. But all I'm putting this forward for is for discussion, because that's the way the community is moving there slowly nationally. And I just think it would be a good thing to discuss a bit more, considering some of the human factors recommendations that we already have.
Erin's had her hand up very patiently for a while.
It's digital.
Her digital hand.
Uh-oh. And then can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because my headphones just went. So I couldn't agree with Mike more strongly. I feel like this is something that, again, we're trying to ensure the trust of the public. I would like to be in a position where the trust the public has in their clinical laboratory testing results when they go to a doctor is equivalent to the trust we have in our forensic crime laboratories when they're producing evidence. I think the efforts that these bodies are making to draft these standards and so forth are not just for their own edification. It's because we are seeing real problems in this system and they're trying to address them. And I personally would say, I understand the concern about, well, if a standard isn't finalized or there might be conflicting standards in the field and we think this one's better, or, what Pat just said, which I think is really important, which is the standard is not high enough for our satisfaction. We want to have a different standard because actually we think it's a better standard and more responsible. But the two most important things to me here are that directors or laboratories, whoever in the laboratory is tasked with this work, this is part of what they're doing, and that it is an ongoing commitment and not a kind of one shot, and that information is shared and publicly available, because the whole process of science should be iterative in this way. If there is something happening in a lab and they're saying our standard is better, or we disagree with this body and prefer that body, I think it's useful for the community at large to have that information so that they can learn from it and they can, adopt their own changes and standards, because these are not fixed. Not only will the science change, but our understanding about what makes a great lab will change over time as these systems evolve and as we learn from them. So I'm not trying to create, and I don't think that Mike's suggestion is trying to create busy work for labs. I tend to agree with the idea that if they're doing it already, it shouldn't be that hard. And if there's only an expectation of 3 per year, or addressing 3 issue areas a year, you could pick 3 OSAC standards, and you maybe don't have to say I'm implementing that specific standard, but you have to be responsive to that standard and say we do SWGDAM here, or we do our higher standard here. I think that's useful. And the last I could say is, I think the concern is that not every lab is doing this, right? Recognizing that many are, hoping that all will, but that we're still in a very reactive model. That the model is we wait for a big problem, we wait for a newspaper story, and then we react to it. And that we should be in a proactive problem-solving model where we're anticipating what's going to happen, and we have all this great work that's been done recently. And so, I like the idea of stamping it on the SOP. If a lab director is keeping a spreadsheet like Pat and says, I have my, the standards that I'm using, then maybe just saying, this is what we follow except for these 3 areas, with precision, knowing here's where we don't follow it. And here's the reason we give for that. You don't have to give the reason for the stuff that is the sort of agreed upon standard in that field, wherever it's coming from, OSAC, SWGDAM, whatever. So, explaining the deviations, or for those labs where maybe there are areas and gaps, that there are aspirations to address 3 of those per year, either by implementing or by giving a clear statement about why they're not implementing.
Bill, your hand is up.
Yes, I'm a little unclear, Mikey, as to what exactly we're doing here. I didn't really know a lot about OSAC till I talked to Mike, so I did a little research on it. And my understanding is there's 270 standards. So this is a 90-year plan, Mike?
Well, just a starting point.
Okay.
Right? Just a starting.
Here, we all have one thing in common on this commission. and that is we want labs to put the best product forward in a clear, intelligible, and honest way. And then let Jessica and me fight about what it means in a court. No, seriously. And that's fair. And I've often said that I didn't write the rules, but I've often said that I'm not sure lawyers should be on this commission, but we are. So being thoroughly unqualified to talk about the topic, let me continue. Apparently OSAC's a little different as I understand it, because you get to be a standard by a 2/3 vote, which strikes me as a little odd. And I don't know what the standards are, which is there's 270 of them. I don't know what they are. How do they differ from the standards that we currently use in the state of New York? I also learned that there isn't a single mandated OSAC lab or a lab in the country that is mandated to use OSAC's standards. It's all voluntary, they're recommendations. And I also understand they're an arm of NIST. So if the recommendations are anything like what I just read from NIST, then I'm not a big supporter of this. But if it's a better product, if it improves something, you know, we'd all be in favor of that. I just don't know. Does OSAC recommend, you know, a quality control audit once a year, and ISO recommends one every 2 years? I don't know. And is this something that labs would be able to absorb? And how different would life be? Of the 270, how many are already adopted? You may or may not be aware ISO just changed or issued new guidelines on 21043. I haven't read them yet, but they may make this issue move. But I would just like to hear from NICLAD about their opinion on this, and get in, just do a little deeper dive. This is what OSAC has recommended. This is why we can't do that. This is what OSAC recommended. We already do. This would be the cost of it. This is a recommendation that sounds good, but really we can't adopt. I don't know. Does that make sense to my colleagues in the defense bar? I just don't feel qualified to say, let's get our labs to adopt 3 standards for 2026. Which one of the 3 do they pick of the 270? And does, you know, Onondaga pick 3 and Suffolk picks a different 3, and it's a big mission. You know, that's my only question. I know Mark. I know Mike's heart and mind is in the right place, and I'd like to try to get some resolution on this. But I'm just a little curious as to why we're, or I hope we're not in a position today to mandate that, you know, New York labs adopt OSAC, whether it's 1 standard or 270. So I'd like a little more information, I guess.
Well, Mike, you had suggested actually having someone from OSAC, like John Paul Jones or somebody, come, right, and explain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Can we all agree on that?
I would also like to say, though, if we also hear from the lab.
Yeah, I think that's great.
And you know, to your point to say you'd like to hear from NICLAC. NICLAC discussed this a couple of weeks ago, and the directors would prefer to actually, in some instances, speak themselves, because their lab situations are different. And it's really not always appropriate for me to summarize each lab's situation, or how they feel, or the experiences they've had in doing their gap analysis, or looking at some of these standards, you know, to the way they operate in their lab. The other thought is, if we wanted to hear from the technical experts in the technical working groups, but I think that's
working groups.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really equivalent to hearing from OSAC would be to hear from who we serve.
Yes, you know, to have JP be here to educate commissioners, because I don't know if the lab directors need to be educated, but is it for us? Because to tell lab directors that they need to be educated in OSAC, it's kind of like.
And I think I'm hearing that commission members
It's
are
the
in
commission.
different levels of
Okay.
understanding of what this
Yeah.
is.
Okay.
I think. So I've heard lab and NICLAC and lab staff or bench analytical experts, right? NICLAC director opinion and then the OSAC.
At least invite them.
Are we including SWIG, STM to come and do their roadshow too, or is it just OSAC?
My understanding is the OSAC registry of documents includes ASTM documents.
They basically just threw them right in there for drugs.
But not all of them,
Yeah.
but maybe the OSAC explanation explains why some of them are there, like why is one ASTM standard there and one is not. I don't know.
I just want to point out too, when we get opinions, I think the opinions have to be scaled. You know, it doesn't have to be about this, but there's going to be a difference between a lab director being asked to adhere to all in 3 years or 3 in 1 year. That is the choice of the lab, right? No?
Well, I think
because
people are
that
just
doesn't
gonna,
really make sense.
I think people are gonna not like what I have to say, but in terms of it, like, as a director.
Yep.
Right? You're giving me a document that's gonna improve my product. I'm either doing all of it or none of it. Like 3 a year, then what happens on the 4th that I didn't do? I don't do something properly. Oh, I should have chose that
Well, then I
standard,
guess,
or if I had that standard.
That's for discussion. Yeah. And I wanted to say I 100% weight the opinions of the lab directors on the committee, because that's, you guys are the ones running the labs and seeing this day to day. So if this doesn't improve things, then I'm off my soapbox and I'm good with it. So.
Erin?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask that if I think it would be helpful to have voices from the labs, and if we could try to draw like a diverse cross section, so we get a sense of sort of the, you know, like not just the same voices kind of we always hear from, but maybe a smaller lab that isn't as active in participating in these discussions, as well as big lab. You know, I just don't want to sort of only hear from the people we might already hear from all the time, but maybe hear from some folks who are dealing with different kinds of challenges based on the size of the lab or the location of the lab or the type of cases they receive, the agencies they work with, et cetera.
I'm just wondering, so right now we use ISO standards as our gold standards, right? So they're not static either. They are updated every 5 years. And I assume they take into account a lot of these recommendations when they're updated.
You know, the OSAC are discipline specific. So some for DNA, drug chemistry.
But generally, they are reworded criteria that we're already following. As far as my review, the 3 reviews that we've done over the past, since 2001, it hasn't changed. I have emails from the results of it saying, okay, these 2 came out, but it's already in accreditation document 1.3.2 and so forth. And again, is the 4 that we weren't interested. I thought they had good reasons to not. But like I said, I do that for SWIG also. I mean, we look at SWIG standards when they come out. We look at, you know, everything that comes out. So I just, again, because I just don't want people thinking that New York State labs are just saying, I don't want to do OSAC. It's just, you know, some of us regard OSAC as the golden standard. Some of us don't. It's really a preference. It's a preference. I grew up on SWIG.
Mike, you said something about, you just said to help improve things. And
what's going wrong?
What in particular do you think that adopting the OSAC standards are going to improve?
So
that we're not already doing.
What's broken?
That's fair. I already had made a statement that this is not about condemning or questioning what is happening in labs, but the spirit of these standards are to have high quality work continue and are updated, right? In fact, the SWIGs, with the exception of SWIG Dam, they're still around certainly, but the idea is OSAC would take the place of a lot of these SWIGs. Some of the SWIGs still are around for sure. But this, again, this is here, it's national. There's people from your labs on them, or at least New York State labs on these bodies.
Including yourself.
Including myself, well, not anymore, but yes, yep. And including other directors in the state and other analysts in the state. And so I don't have, I'm not pushing them because I was on it. I'm pushing them because I understand it. And in response to the human factors report regarding what the DNA subcommittee said, they specifically mentioned as well.
So just to sum it up and maybe kind of we'll talk about this in December. OFS will work to get some of this information and make some invitations to people to come to the meeting. It'll be an old business item. Is everyone okay with that proposal? Yep. And Pat, for the record, clarification, do you mean 2021 or do you mean 2001? Because my understanding is the OSACs didn't exist prior to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right. I just want to clarify.
2001, I was still in New York City, so 2021, 2023, 2025.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to.
Sorry. That's what happens when you unretire.
That's what happens when they unretire. Karen's listening. Be careful.
It's just plus or minus 20 years to be a big distinction for people, so I figured clarify that. Okay. So OFS will work on that, and you will see it again in December. Now on to the Kaiogen. At the August meeting, the DNA subcommittee did discuss, at the request of the commission, the recent Kaiogen disclosures and reviewed a status summary from the BioTwig of the affected laboratories. The DNA subcommittee found initial steps being taken by the affected labs to be reasonable. However, they did request some additional information from the affected labs that they will be reviewing at the November meeting. So that's still kind of open and ongoing. But that's where they're at. So at the November meeting, they'll be kind of going further.
Can I just ask a couple of questions? Yeah, I think that was one of the questions I had, is more detail about how labs are investigating it, but that you said will be at the next meeting. I did listen to the DNA subcommittee discussing this issue, and I think one question that came up, maybe it's been resolved, is how would the subcommittee obtain like Kaiogen documents? Because they didn't have them, I think, for their review. So has that been? Did lab directors give them to them? Should we be reaching out to Kaiogen or
the letterheads for the incident?
Yeah, like the customer disclosures. I thought I heard, I could be wrong, but I thought the DNA subcommittee were like, wait, we don't have those.
They were direct to customer. So
yeah,
the vendor supplies it to, and we've ran into this before. Vendors don't have to provide us.
And they won't? Has anyone asked Kaiogen?
We can try.
Oh, because you're not a customer. Right. I'll forward it.
Okay.
Yeah, I just think because the subcommittee asked for it, which is reasonable, like what's going on? Yeah.
Yeah, but generally, directors, director, assistant director, QA, that's who we have on the notifications, and that's who brought it to my attention. They brought it to me when it first came out.
Right. And just one other question, I just don't know, the line in this is page 157 for the commissioners. Labs have placed photos of cartridges throughout the lab and are instructing analysts to check cartridges prior to use. Do labs track the cartridge numbers? Is that a thing that makes sense that they have to, right?
They all have lots. Yeah. They all have lots, but in terms of training, right, the first thing you're supposed to do is knock the cartridge down so that you get the resin downward. And I guess some of them were empty. Some of them were empty. We fortunately, we've finished our investigation and we're confident that we had the lot number, but we didn't have any effect. So I'm just not sure where the other labs are right now. But definitely a concern.
Ongoing and update after November, you'll have that again on your December agenda.
It all depends on their use. Like if labs use the instrument more often than others, then it's going to take them much longer.
the lab disclosure memo. At the last commission meeting, the commission voted to send a letter to all lab directors and elected district attorneys regarding disclosures of dishonesty or gross misconduct. The letter was shared with those groups as well as the DNA subcommittee members, the New York State Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and the New York State Defenders Association in August. So that's update on that letter that was requested. Erin.
Well, I just wanted to say I thought it was a really great letter, and I'm grateful to those who spent the time drafting it and doing the work. Also, while I have the floor, can I just clarify that we also concluded related to the DNA subcommittee question that the DNA subcommittee, we're going to ask them to make a special appearance in December as well? I just wasn't sure if that's what we.
I have that as an action item as well.
Okay.
Related to the human factors. Their letter, yes.
And the mixture report. I think both are. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, next, lab disclosures. We will now move into that section, and the Office of Forensic Services has implemented another new form. So you may have noticed another form in your binder, the Quality Event Reporting Form, effective July 1st, for reporting all disclosures to PCJS and ANAB. The form will be provided at a minimum, initial notifications and closeouts of reportable events, and will standardize the information provided to the commission. I say at a minimum because some labs will provide ongoing updates, so you may have it more frequently, but minimally the labs have been asked to use it for notification and closeout. So first at lab today is the Erie County Medical Examiner's Office of Forensic Toxicology. The lab has notified us of an unexpected result on a proficiency test due to a sample swap. Upon receiving the results and discovering the two samples appeared to be switched, it was determined that the samples were mislabeled during intake into the laboratory. The individual who accessions the samples will undergo a period of observation, and pictures will be taken after labeling and saved into the case file to allow for verification. Questions for the laboratory? And I see Stephen's hand is already up. So.
Yeah, it actually goes backwards, but we can come back to it. I think we should address publicly the follow-up from the last meeting on the lab disclosure memo to lab directors concerning reporting incidents that District Attorney Fitzgerald and I had drafted and then was subsequently sent out.
Absolutely, we can handle that before we move into this section. Yes.
Did you want to do that now? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Why don't we do that now, and then we'll go into the lab.
Yeah, at the I mean, I can give a little bit of a background at the last meeting during a conversation of an investigation that occurred in executive session, I believe, so I won't go into the details. It became evident that some items that should be reported out in discovery process that's required under the criminal procedure law, which was amended in 2019, may or may not have been happening in individual situations that involve questions where there's a lab analyst who may or may not be testifying. And the issue that was brought up at the meeting was, at our last meeting, was that the disclosure shouldn't be connected to or depending upon whether or not that analyst was going to testify in that particular case. District Attorney Fitzgerald went over the issues that would present concerning plea bargaining and other issues of credibility. The 2019
Hey, Morgenstern, it's Fitzpatrick.
Oh, geez, I'm sorry, Bill. Bill, what did I say? I didn't say District Attorney Fitzpatrick, did I?
Fitzgerald.
It's been a long morning. So it was suggested that District Attorney Fitzpatrick and I draft a memo to be sent to the lab directors, which was done, approved by council, and then sent out to the lab directors. It's in the materials.
Thank you. It was received. We did hear that from labs that they were in receipt of it. Let's see. Sorry. We're going to jump back then to the Erie County issue. And are there any questions for the Erie County Toxicology Lab Director? Aaron, I see your hand up. I believe the director is available virtually to join us. Good morning.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good morning.
Should I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead, Erin.
Hi, good morning.
Hi,
Thank you
good morning.
for joining us. So I just had a question. I wanted to make sure I understood what happened, and then I wanted to make sure I understood how you were thinking of it. So from what I understood, when you receive the proficiency test, there's multiple samples, and just in the process of logging those samples, the analysts switched samples, so they were labeled with the wrong label. The test that was performed was correct, but it was associated with the wrong case, basically.
Correct.
Okay. So the only thing the report and the corrective action made sense to me. The only thing that raised a question in my mind was I understand that it's unusual, like what made a proficiency test environment different than a casework example was that you usually work on one case at a time, which obviously would not lead to a switch sample between cases. But it wasn't clear to me that sometimes when you're working on a single case, there couldn't be multiple samples within the single case. So the same kind of labeling error could occur. And just from the materials here, it seemed to be that your feeling was this was a really a switch issue that would only arise in a proficiency test. And I just wanted to understand whether that's in fact correct, or whether this could actually arise in a casework sample, and so the same procedures should be implemented to make sure it doesn't happen within casework.
Right. Well, with our postmortem cases, they're actually labeled on the autopsy side when we receive them. So the only cases that we actually label are the legal cases, and we only get bloods, and we put all the, case labels on them. They're all the same type of sample. They're all bloods. With the proficiency, it comes in a box. There's 5 samples, but they're each an individual case in our system. So we don't ever have multiple cases out on the bench at one time when logging.
But you could have multiple samples from within a case that you would still need to be logging in the system?
Well, not with postmortem. Postmortem, they're already labeled.
But with legal, you could?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to, all I'm saying is to the extent that could happen in the legal, to the extent that part of the issue here was a mislabeling when multiple samples are out, it sounds like that could happen in a legal analysis too. So I just wanted to, unless that's not right, I wanted to make sure that's how everyone's thinking about this. Like, oh, this kind of error actually could occur here too. So the procedures we're using, we should implement to make sure it doesn't happen. We should make sure we're implementing.
I guess you would be labeling a blood versus another blood, but they're the same case. They're the same blood. So you can't really swap that blood.
But it is a different, I mean, I understand the ramifications might not be as serious, but the precision that we are properly labeling that sample as the right sample, whether for reverse, I mean, right? Maybe I'm misunderstanding something.
I guess I'm not understanding.
Could I interject?
Yeah, maybe someone can clarify.
Yeah, I think I might understand, so let me just give it a try. Are the samples, most of the samples that you receive in your laboratory are pre-labeled.
Correct.
So with the proficiency test samples, you're getting them, you're opening up a box, there's 5 vials in the box, and then you have to label them yourself.
Correct.
So you did the mislabeling inadvertently, as opposed to receiving samples that were previously labeled. So I think they are physically labeling these PT samples themselves, as opposed to receiving samples that were already labeled before they received it. So I think that may be why they're saying that it would be limited to PTs, because they're the ones who are doing the labeling.
I see. So you don't have to do labeling of samples in the legal context either.
Well, we do with the legal cases, but it's one case that you'll receive 3 blood tubes. So for the one case, so we label 3 to one person. So I'm not sure how you could swap the 2 blood tubes because you're labeling them.
But when you label the blood tubes, are they all labeled with an identical label, or is it like person A1, person A2, person A3?
Yes, it's like if the case was 100, it'd be 100.1, 100.2, 100.3.
Okay, so this is where my concerns are arising, because if you are doing some labeling and you're doing it, I understand, I just want to be clear. I understand that the implications of mislabeling are less serious when it's the same bloods essentially from the same person. But just because, you know, we're aspiring to do exactly correct work, we would want the label 0.1 to be associated with the test result that is 0.1, and therefore the labeling problem seems like it could still arise. Let me just say, to the extent that labeling is occurring and it was revealed through proficiency testing to have some, you know, issues, I would encourage you to think about that with intra-case samples, not just inter-case samples as well. And maybe I'm still missing something, but.
Good. Steve, is your hand up?
Yes, thank you. It is. I kind of following up on Erin, and I had the same concern when I was reading, in that it was indicated that this was for educational purposes only. And I went through the same thought process. When you're doing the runs, aren't you also using multiple subject samples, reference standards, internal standards, volatile mixes? And you're running runs with samples of different subjects in the legal cases, right?
Correct.
So if you mislabel a subject sample, that potentially could be a problem during the run, right? I mean, so that same, I agree with Erin. I think that same concern about the process of labeling is vital. It's one of the most important things. We need to know that what's put in, you know, into the GC using GCFID.
I mean, we do have a GCFID, yes.
Okay, so we need to know that what's actually put in each label is actually properly identified. So I'm not saying they're not, but I agree with Erin that I don't think the fact that it's just for educational purposes only is the be all and end all. I think it's important to consider that process in the legal cases and the labeling process, and in sort of doing the root cause analysis and determining whether or not there are any similar concerns in the legal analysis.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, because on the carousel, right, each individual vial has to match your batch sheet.
Correct. Yes.
And if it doesn't, and that was what you thought was a subject sample, but not an internal standard, that error could never be caught.
Right.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Are there any other comments for the laboratory this time? Thank you for joining us today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, up next we have the Monroe County Crime Laboratory. Laboratory has made an initial notification to DCJS and ANAB regarding a sample swap during an extraction in the biology section. The evidence was re-extracted and the analyst has been temporarily removed from casework. A closeout has been submitted to ANAB and DCJS regarding an incorrect name that was provided to another laboratory in response to an NDIS first discussed at our June meeting, and previous cases were reviewed. And finally, a closeout was submitted to DCJS and ANAB regarding an unexpected proficiency test result in firearms first discussed at the December 2024 meeting. It was found that the analyst had the correct results in their report, but entered a different result into the proficiency test provider's portal. Are there any questions for the Monroe Laboratory?
Can I don't know if this is for them, but my understanding about the first one is that this is just the initial notice, but we're going to hear more later. Is that correct?
Yeah, so as they get through their quality investigation, we would see that more later. You'll notice that these are dated pre-July 1st. So
Yeah, I can wait for that more information then.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. The Monroe County Office of the Medical Examiner Division of Forensic Toxicology The laboratory notified DCJS and ANAB of unexpected results on a proficiency test. Upon investigation, it appeared that the sample had been unintentionally diluted. Approximately 6 months worth of cases were reviewed, with no other cases found to be affected. Analysts and reviewers were retrained to look at discrepancies between screening and quantitative results. And we do have the lab director here today if there are any questions for the lab. None. Nassau County Office of the Medical Examiner, Division of Forensic Toxicology. 2 items. Laboratory notified of a closeout of an unexpected acetone proficiency test result, first discussed at the June meeting. Acetone was correctly identified. However, quantitative testing results were outside of the laboratory's acceptance criteria. The laboratory investigated, modified the method, and quantitative reporting of the acetone in vitreous specimens has been reinstated. The laboratory has also provided DCJS and ANAB with initial notification and closeout of an issue on a postmortem case report. The term "not detected" was inadvertently selected in a drop-down menu in place of the units associated with the ethanol result. The error was detected by the customer upon receipt of the report. An amended report was issued, and additional cases were reviewed with no other errors found. The lab is looking to increase the percentage of postmortem cases that undergo tech review. Are there any questions for the laboratory?
I don't have any questions for the lab, but I'll just say we keep seeing these drop-down menu issues, and I just want to sort of state publicly on the record that maybe like the drop-down menu is not the best format for this stuff. So I don't know.
Yes, fair comment.
If any vendors are listening, we preference non-drop-down menus.
Anything else on these items? Okay. The New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Biology, we have been provided additional interim updates to their case-to-case contamination investigation, first discussed in the September 2024 meeting. The lab is currently moving toward working with a statistical consultant to design a method for continuous evaluation of contamination risk. Any questions for the laboratory today?
I just want to thank them again for their transparency and how thorough they're being with us. I think it's incredibly impressive, and it really shows that they have done their due diligence.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. The New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner's Department of Forensic Toxicology has 2 items. They notified DCJS and ANAB of 2 unexpected proficiency test results. The first is regarding ethanol and acetone results that fell outside of the laboratory's acceptable criteria. Following investigation, it was determined that the instrument had stopped during the run, which may have affected the results. The second notification is regarding cocaine results that fell outside of the laboratory's acceptable criteria. The laboratory investigated and believes the stability of the analyte is most likely the cause of this issue. Any questions for the lab today?
It was also sent to NMS, and NMS also had a low quantity too. Is this the example of which one right now?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have a question. I'm seeking clarification.
Okay. The New York City Police Department latent print section, 2 items here. Been notified of a missing evidence from a case holder. In searching for the missing evidence, 2 additional cases were found where evidence was missing. In all 3 cases, the evidence envelope was not sealed. The evidence was not found through a thorough search, and the laboratory has taken several corrective actions, including keeping evidence envelopes closed until examination is assigned and scanning lift cards for cases assigned for examination. The laboratory has also notified DCJS and ANAB of the closeout of an issue first discussed at the December 2024 meeting regarding differing conclusions upon re-examination of a case. As the case was originally examined in 1994, it was determined that the current protocols used within the laboratory address the issues identified, including documentation of evaluation, side-by-side images of latent and known prints, and independent verifications. Are there any questions for the laboratory on these events? I see Aaron's hand up. We have the lab director and quality manager virtually available. We'll get them connected.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
I can, yeah.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for joining us. So on the first issue, the missing evidence issue, a couple questions. One is, were these all residential burglary cases? Was this tied to the, were they all in that cluster of cases or cases that were not under the initial, whatever it is, 6 or 5 case types where there was review?
Yeah, they were all under the types of cases that we don't initially examine. One of them was a residential burglary, and it was when we were going back to get all of the residential burglary cases to get them assigned. That's when we discovered that the evidence was missing, and then that triggered us to do a full audit of all of the cases that had come in.
Got it. And the second and sort of related is like the remedy seems, just from my perspective, you know, like keep the folder closed seems like something, or like seal the envelope seems basic. So I guess I was confused about like, was this something that was in place but not followed? Is there a reason why it wasn't being followed that you're now understanding better? Or kind of like that was a surprise to me, that it was like, oh, you know, the reason was something that didn't strike me as, you know, unusual. It struck me as something standard.
Right. Well, so, you know, we didn't, since we never found the evidence, we didn't quite determine the reason or how it was lost. So all of these are just sort of procedures that we're thinking about that could have helped, you know, the situation. In this particular one, so with these evidence cases, this is like I said in the paperwork, this is a new procedure for not automatically analyzing all the cases that come in. So we were following, you know, our older protocols of opening the evidence. You know, it's submitted to our laboratory in a sealed condition. We were opening it up, inventorying it, entering it sort of into our database of cases received, and then putting away into our vault. What we've decided is one of the things with these cases that we are not analyzing is we're not going to ever open that evidence. Like there's no reason to open it until it's been determined that we're going to examine it. So all of these 3 cases were cases that we were not initially going to examine. So if we had never opened the evidence in the first place, it would still be in the folder that it came in, or the evidence envelope that it came in.
I get it. So it was the change in the practice where maybe people weren't as careful to close it because it was just going to go for analysis that you think might have contributed?
No, I don't think that that's what it was. I don't think it was that somebody wasn't being careful. And I don't think, honestly, that we lost it because the evidence envelope wasn't sealed. It's, you know, in a flat envelope, it's stuck together. It's very hard for them to fall out. I think something happened in the processing of the administrative part of it, where it got thrown out maybe by the clerical supervisor who was working on it.
Okay, so well, I guess then a couple. So one question is the evidence logged somewhere else? Like if it comes in and you are not logging what's in the envelope, presumably someone else had, like the police department or whatever, has logged what's inside. Is that?
Yes.
Okay, so there will be, when it's opened, like, you know, I'm imagining a world 15 years from now where there's some new technology and we reopen the envelope. We will have a way of making sure that what's inside is what was supposed to be inside. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then to the extent that it wasn't that the envelope wasn't closed, but maybe something else that's happening clerically, have you done anything to address? Because if I'm understanding correctly, there were 3 cases where this came up, or you noticed this issue in 3 cases. So is there anything you've done to address that piece when it comes to cases that are going for analysis? You know, because obviously if you don't open the envelope at all, you don't have to worry about something getting accidentally thrown out or whatever, but you're still opening the envelope when you're doing the analysis cases. So is there, if the thing that you think happened was something was accidentally discarded, is there something that is in place to prevent that from happening in the cases that are in the mandatory examination category?
Yes, so we are no longer, sort of triaging the evidence before assigning it. So it was going to our clerical, our people to sort of triage it, open it up, inventory it, make sure it's, been entered into our spreadsheet, and then it would go back to the supervisor to then assign it for examination. So we're no longer doing that. The examiner, and only the examiner, is the one that is opening this evidence, and immediately upon opening it, they're now scanning in the lift card and examination quality. So, also not a good scenario, but the worst case scenario that if we did lose it, we still have an examination quality lift of it. So that's what we're doing now.
Great, that makes sense. Okay, I think that's all I had. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for the laboratory regarding? Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I thought that OCMA talks had two, unless
the cocaine and the acetone.
yeah, okay.
Oh,
Sorry, apparently I picked the exact wrong time to run to the ladies' room. Did I miss OCME contamination? I know this is not fair, but is there any way they're still available? I did have just a few questions about their updates.
Are they?
Is that totally uncool?
Brianna, are they still available online? Join us.
They are.
Totally uncool.
She's just.
Next time they're gonna log out.
Right.
I know,
Yeah.
I think we just created a disincentive to hang around.
That's what I did.
Should not have.
I thought I carefully calibrated it.
Well, thank you for joining us, OCME. Sorry you were not off the hook.
Hi, OCME. Sorry, it's my fault. I picked the wrong time to leave the room. So sorry about that. Oh, can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me apologizing?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay,
We were
yeah,
just about to log off.
Right.
Kidding.
Too late, Frank.
Can you see us? We do have a camera.
I can't see.
We can't see your
Can't
heads,
see
we can
you.
see your torsos.
Yeah. We have Tiffany and Kira. Oh no.
All right, sorry. Good afternoon. Craig O'Connor, Laboratory Director, and with me, Deputy Director Meredith Rosenberg, Quality Assurance Manager Kira McKay, and DNA Technical Leader Tiffany Vasquez.
Thank you for coming back, seriously. I did just have a few questions about your updates, and I want to say I appreciate certainly that you are providing updates each month. That's very helpful. But I did have a couple of questions. For your phase 3 examination, forgive me if I misunderstand this, but my understanding was that out of the 9, and now I think there are 11, but of the contaminating analysts, as part of phase 3, you examined all the casework for the 4 analysts that had more than 2 instances of case-to-case contamination. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And when you did go back through all the casework, you uncovered 13 additional case-to-case instances of case-to-case contamination?
Yes, in that phase, yes.
Okay, in that phase. And then I think you said at the last meeting, the June meeting, that for the remaining, just keeping the universe at 9, the remaining 5 analysts that had 2 or less instances of case-to-case contamination, you were going to consider either reviewing all of their casework or sampling, doing some sort of subset. And I just wondered what the status was of review of those remaining 5 analysts.
That's part of the statistical analysis that we're planning to do, and that we've put out a purchase order to get some external help with that. So that's still in progress. Okay.
Yeah, and that was actually anticipated. My next question is, what is the status of that phase 4?
At this point, we're still trying to secure the purchase order to, get the funds for that. So it's with OMB, I believe, and it's still in that process.
Okay. Do you have any sense of a timeline on that, or you can't tell since you're.
At this point, it's out of our hands, Jessica, so I can't really tell at this point. So it's really a waiting game, unfortunately.
Okay.
We do want to do it as quickly as possible, obviously, but we're in the waiting game right now.
Yep. Since the June meeting, in you provided one the day of or the day after our last meeting in June, and then a July, August, and September update. Looking at those, it appears there have been 2 additional discoveries of case-to-case contamination. And I understand that at least one of those actually wasn't uncovered by your laboratory, but instead was discovered by the Bronx DNA or forensics director in the district attorney's office. But could you just speak about those 2 additional instances of case-to-case contamination?
Sure.
Well, with regards to the one that you mentioned with the Bronx, a question was brought to our attention with regards to a DNA hit about a case in the Bronx, and that's what led me to look into the case and identify that the DNA found on the gun, which had hit to an individual whose abandonment sample we had in-house, was a result of contamination.
So the hit that was erroneous or a result of the contaminating event was to an abandonment sample that was in your local suspect index? Is that right?
That's correct. What had actually been examined was a true sample from this individual in January 2024. Following that examination, a gun was examined and a profile was determined on that gun, which matched to that abandonment sample in Elvis for the same individual. But just to be clear, the sample cut in 2024 was a true, but that sample was not in the database. An abandonment sample was in the database.
And my understanding is that the actual case, thinking about the consequences, the gun case had already been resolved at the time you issued the hit report. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so. The case had plenty of additional information that led to a plea deal that did not involve DNA testing. So, yes, the case had been resolved.
I'm sorry, it just got a little garbled. You said it did not involve. Could you just repeat that? Sorry.
Yes, the case had proceeded without any DNA testing. And decisions were made, at least at the law enforcement standpoint, with a plea deal that did not involve DNA. So then, when this result came out, it was a surprise to the district attorney, since the profile from the gun did not match the individual who had the plea deal.
And why did the result or the hit come out so long after the case had resolved, if I understand correctly?
That I don't know, because I don't know the exact date that the case resolved related to when we did the DNA testing.
Yes, the testing on the gun sample was during has been part of the QA investigation. So some of the things that we're doing is that we are going back and deconvoluting gun samples that weren't previously deconvoluted. Based on our protocol right now, not everything gets deconvoluted up front, especially if there's no exemplar to compare to, no comparison sample. But as far as the QA investigation, in order to try and detect any possible forms of contamination, we are going back and doing some deconvolutions on some of those previous gun samples that weren't. So this sample was part of that QA process.
And how are you selecting which samples you're deconvoluting for further QA investigation?
It's based on the RCA recommendations again. So we're starting with the individuals that had contamination events.
All 9 or 11 of them, or?
Yes, at this point, it's all 9 of them.
And what's the status of that? How many left do you have left to deconvolute?
I'm not sure what the actual number is.
Okay. And then what happens once you deconvolute? So you get like a male donor A or something, and then what? You send it.
The results certainly run the gamut. Like we'll do the deconvolution, and it might still be a mixture for comparison only, with no distinct profile determined. If there is a male donor A that's determined, then the case is evaluated to see if it makes sense in the context of the case, and whether or not it could be the result of contamination. So it goes through all of the QC checks that we normally do.
What about the other instance of case-to-case contamination that occurred since our June meeting? Or not occurred, I'm sorry, that was discovered? So your audio cut out.
Oh, this was also part of the QA investigation that we're doing, looking at exemplars that have been processed and comparing them against the database to ensure that the integrity of some of the profiles within the database. So that's how this was uncovered.
Sorry, again, by the deconvolution step and then comparing it to your local database? Is that what you said?
No, not for that. We were looking at exemplars that were cut and processed.
Oh, I see.
And then comparing that, similar to what Kira was talking about with the other contamination where the exemplar was cut and then a gun sample was cut after that. We were doing a quality control check involving those types of scenarios against the database, and that's how this incident was uncovered.
And is there anything in either of these two cases that is, it sounds like the pattern you had articulated before, but is that the case? Is there any new information that you've learned from these additional instances that casts new light on a root cause or gets you any further, farther away, raises new issues?
I would say no to that. As mentioned in the letters, it still follows that same mode of transmission that we've seen, where it's a higher template type sample that was contaminating a lower template type sample.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Thank you, Osimi. Okay. Our next lab is the New York State DCJS Latent Print Laboratory. DCJS and ANAD were notified of an unexpected result of a efficiency test. While the examiner attained the expected results, the laboratory policy was not followed. The examiner was retrained and an internal efficiency test was successfully completed. Procedure was also updated to further clarify the efficiency test completion. Any questions for the laboratory? Aaron's hand is up. The laboratory is here. Welcome. Erin, go ahead, the floor.
Thank you. So I just wanted to clarify on the public record. So we have 2 instances of use of SABIS during proficiency testing, which is impermissible under the rules of the test. I want to clarify that I see these kinds of issues as having 3 levels. One level is a proficiency test is intended to ensure an analyst can perform the work. We can fight about, how accurate they are, et cetera, but that's the goal for sure. The second is what it means to cheat on a proficiency test, regardless of whether or not you can do the work. You might be perfectly able to do it had you not cheated, but the act of cheating tells you something about a person's honesty or how they'll behave when they fear a repercussion, a professional repercussion, et cetera. And then the third would be, of course, if confronted or if, you know, they're caught cheating, how they respond to that, which is another sign of someone's sort of honesty or willingness to be dishonest for their own professional advancement or because they're concerned about their employment or any other reason. So to me, the skill set question is one that I think most labs, you know, deal with by retraining or determining whether someone can perform the work. But once you get into the honesty pieces, it becomes very critical for this commission's oversight of labs, for the performance of our legal system, because that's not really something, it's very hard to catch people when they're dishonest, right? If they can't do the work, that's easier to figure out. But if they're willing to lie or misrepresent their abilities, that's very, very hard to figure out. And so when you get into the dishonesty piece, in the kind of work that these analysts are doing and the importance of the work that they're doing to the proper functioning of our justice system, it really makes an analyst non-functional if you can't trust their honesty, either to perform on tests following the rules given or to be honest and forthcoming. So it really makes them a non-functional employee as far as I'm concerned. They can't do the work if you can't trust their honesty. And certainly any lawyer who learns of that, whether prosecution or defense, is going to say this person's evidence isn't worth anything because of that concern. And so I just wanted to verify that's how you are conceptualizing this issue and how it's understood in the broader community to be conceptualized, because sometimes I think it's easy to blur the difference between the two. It's easy to blur, like, well, can you do the work or not do the work, regardless of these other things.
I understand the point you're making, yes. Is there anything else for the laboratory?
I just wanted to make clear that there have been in your laboratory 2 instances of analysts essentially cheating by using SABIS on their proficiency testing. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. And you've notified the district attorney's offices?
I have for the one, correct.
What do you mean the one?
So we deemed these in 2 different manners, levels of nonconformance, based on the information that was found within my investigation of the 2 proficiency tests. One I deemed a level 1 and therefore required an immediate address and involvement within our own human resources department. The second one, based on the individual's involvement within the laboratory, their level of association with the casework, what they did with their proficiency test, the outcome of the proficiency test, the documentation within the proficiency test, and the questioning of the situation. And based on the evaluation that took place, it seemed more relevant that, though understood generally that SABIS is not to be used during proficiency testing, it was not black and white enough in the instructions because SABIS is so routinely used during casework analysis that it caused confusion or may have blurred that understanding of when it can be used and when it shouldn't be used, and understanding the purpose of the proficiency test itself outside of the use of a tool in our forensic analysis.
And you I think, disclosed that you've changed your protocols actually to make it more explicit when an analyst is taking a proficiency test, what they can.
That's correct, yes.
But I just want to be very clear about, we, you know, as a commission, we sent around this letter reminding laboratories about their responsibilities for disclosure. And I know you disclosed one of the 2 analysts, but this second incident would still come under that letter. It's still Brady material that needs to be disclosed, even though they're mitigating circumstances, et cetera. But you could consult with the district attorney on the case, obviously, and your own lawyer. But just to be clear, my understanding is that analyst articulated they knew they shouldn't have checked their proficiency test on Say This. Even though they had completed it, they knew they did something wrong. They articulated that to you.
It's been understood that Say This was not to be used during proficiency testing.
And the analyst said that they understood they were not supposed to do that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, actually, one more thing. Have you disclosed, so I know you disclosed the one to the district attorney's office, but what about the defense bar?
The letters that initially, are you referring to the?
Well, I'm really referring to both, but let's start with the one where you already notified all DAs, and I think in the state of New York, practically. Yeah.
In the initial letters that went out, per discovery law and my understanding of discovery law, that notification to those DA's offices indicating that there was a situation associated with someone who has distributed case reports to the various counties, that I do not know if those reports had been used in court. The letters that do associate with some DAs where I do know reports were issued to courts and testimony occurred, that was addressed in the letters. So in essence, telling more specifically to the DAs, please notify the defense attorneys. Another letter has recently gone out through guidance of our legal department to further notify a local court of more information that has been found specific to testimony and additional cases.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's the prosecution's obligation to disclose, and that's separate from you. One thing we did suggest in the commission letter is that you could notify, there are a couple statewide associations of criminal defense lawyers. I would encourage you to make those disclosures as well.
Yes, and if I made the more recent letter that I did follow up with one in particular, I did CC that to the defense community for that local municipality and notify the DA of that.
Great.
We are aware that the local defense agencies received the notification because they reached out.
And they served subpoenas.
Right, we got some subpoenas.
Yeah.
But we know it was provided.
It was received.
Any other questions for the laboratory? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Shelley, I don't have a question for the lab, but I just wanted to make a general statement about proficiency tests. So proficiency tests are purchased from a limited number of vendors, and they don't necessarily align directly with how different laboratories' protocols are written. So sometimes, based on what the proficiency test vendor is expecting a laboratory to report back, we may need to make adjustments to ensure that we are fulfilling the spirit requirements, what have you, of the test from the vendor. So in this particular instance where now it needed to be explicitly said to someone taking the test, don't do this. In another instance, a laboratory may need to say to their analyst, and make sure you do that, because it might not be something that they would do on a regular basis on casework. So I wanted to make sure that it's understood that the PTs don't we can't use a proficiency test exactly the way we may do our work in a particular section. So it's all about making sure that we're clear about what the expectation is back to the vendor, and then that the staff understands before they actually start doing the test, that they understand what to do.
Onondaga County Center for Forensic Sciences has one item today. DCJS and ANEB were notified of the closeout of an issue first discussed in March of 2024. An analyst of not recording or bridge detail on evidence items The analyst's work from the prior 18 months were examined and customers were notified of potential affected items and cases. Re-examination was performed for the requested cases with evidence conducive for retesting. Supplemental reports were issued for the re-examined cases. There was no evidence to suggest other examiners have the same issue, and this particular examiner is no longer in the laboratory's employment. Are there any questions for the lab director today? Okay, I think we have her virtually available.
Was that a yes? There are questions?
Yes, there are questions. We have a hand up from Pat.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon.
So I took a look at the quality event form, and the only thing I get is he's not there anymore. He wasn't recording Friction Bridge. Wasn't anybody else, but the root cause is left as non-applicable. Is it because you couldn't get to the bottom of it, or is it because he just left? Because I'm seeing a possible root cause would help to assure, and obviously people normally record their Friction Bridge, but was there a thought as to what the root cause may have been with this examiner?
There's a couple of possibilities, but we have not been able to discuss this entire incident with the examiner during the entire duration of it. So the possible causes are that either the examiner did not see the Friction Ridge detail and therefore did not document and or photograph it, or they saw it and determined that it was not suitable to be documented for further examination, which in the reanalysis was an incorrect decision.
I just wasn't sure if that's something that should be jotted in the root cause, just so people have a better understanding, but I understand completely. You can't go after an individual and ask them questions when they're no longer employed with you. So.
Right.
Further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Suffolk County Crime Laboratory, one item today. The laboratory provided DCJS and ANAV closeout documents relating to a mixture interpretation discrepancy between biological sciences initial report and a supplemental report. This was first discussed in the September 2024 meeting. All casework from the analyst in which similar scenarios were involved was reviewed with no issues found in the reporting results. A selection of cases from each technical reviewer involved was also reviewed with no similar issues found. The analyst completed retraining and was reauthorized for casework. Any questions for the laboratory regarding this item? I see a couple hands up. Get the lab director and quality team available. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Erin, would you like to go first?
Actually, can you have someone go first? I'm just pulling my notes up. Sorry.
Sure. Pat.
Hey guys, how are you doing?
Hi, good. Can you see us?
Yes.
Yeah, and we can hear you too. So it's a quick question. So, and I do remember this, and this was the situation where the log of likelihood was way off, but the examiner didn't notice it.
No.
Is this the same one? Where you did changed it to 4 and then the likelihood came back, or is this a totally different situation?
I think that's a different, we did have a low log likelihood on this, but that wasn't, they had a note about that. So they did address that negative or low log likelihood. So I don't know if you're talking about something else.
So my again is on this particular thing, on this particular situation, right? Reported mixture of 3 instead. The refresher training is being offered. Do you think the individuals should take part in the refresher training?
They're already signed up.
Great. Okay. It might be helpful just to go over primary, secondary diagnostics and looking at what is intuitive and not. So I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Erin, are you set?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for the minute there. So I was just a little bit, I just want to try to understand better the point that's made in 1E, which at least in our documents is page 249, where it says the elimination samples included a sample from the mom, and that had a likelihood of 0. And then the electropharogram, and I think that's referencing, you know, the sample that we're discussing, which was a 3-person, not a 2-person. So I guess that's the first kind of question is, okay, that the majority of the alleles in that sample belong to mom, which to me just sort of added a new dimension, because you know, like there's a lot of research about how easy it is to confuse a 2-person mixture and a 3-person mixture. And, you know, that's sort of one set of issues, like how well can we do that? And can this analyst do it? But like, it seems like a separate issue also that the analyst had an elimination sample that actually matched the majority of alleles in the sample in question and didn't see that. Am I not understanding?
So when she made the initial assessment as a 2 versus 3, she did not have the elimination of the mother. There was context that there could potentially be the mother had access to the vehicle at the time. But she had gotten that after she had already done her interpretation.
I see. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. You know, it's understandable, but it's also in a case like this very unnerving, obviously, because exactly your greatest fear that both the masking of alleles because of relatedness and the existence of a 3 versus 2-person mixture, you know, leads to an erroneous conclusion, which obviously is the worst case scenario. But thank you, that's clarifying.
That's good.
I noted that you made some changes to your protocols to address some of the human factors that you found to be contributing, like I guess the gene marker terminal was in a busy area, or you know, analysts needed a quiet, dedicated spot to focus. And I think also more supervisors on the floor, or for more accessible or something. What about, and then it seems like there's another sort of box of remedial action that you took, which is to sign up the analyst to the refresher STAR Mix training. Is there any change you consider to the protocols with respect to making inquiries when the item of evidence might have a heightened chance of involving related people? I know you can never tell with certainty in advance, but some things are just, like I think you noted actually in your own, rightfully in your own root cause, like it's a steering wheel, families use cars. Have any of those protocols changed?
Yeah, we actually made we made a tremendous amount of changes to the entire process in the last few months, and one of those included the entire case triaging process. We were finding that we had a few hands in the pot, and each of them were reaching out to the case detectives with their own personal email addresses. So what we did was we made a designated case triage team of senior analysts with one united email address, so that they could reach out to all of the detectives and then still have a maintained communication log, so everybody could be on the same page. And now these cases are being triaged up front of the cases being assigned.
Do you have any special protocol that deals with potential relatedness, like specific questions your analysts would ask a case detective when that is something that might come into play?
Yeah, and I think this is what we addressed when we had the more senior analysts doing the case triages, because now they knew specifically what they should be asking, and they were all on the same page with the questions that they were asking based on the case scenario.
Specifically with respect to, hey, are there any relatives that could have, you know, come in? Okay. Okay. And that's in your protocols?
I mean, do we have it documented specifically?
There's no script, but it's now before the case goes to the analyst, it's going to be like fully triaged. At the time, it really wasn't. We were also like leaving it up to the analyst to be the one to make that phone call and ask those questions, versus now, you know, we changed that method. You know, but we look at the senior analyst, the triaging, look at the case as a whole, and we're almost, in most of our cases, we are asking who else, you know, is living in the home, or, you know, wherever the incident is. We're always asking about biologically related individuals currently, but we don't have a script for like in our protocol, what we would ask.
Right, and we didn't create an SOP for case management. We just have this dedicated team that was, triaging together.
When you did your STARMIX validation, did you include casework samples that contained related individuals? Did you have like a sort of a dedicated study to look at the effect of both mixtures containing relatives and also a mixture where one of the true contributors is related to a non-contributor, and then you compare the non-contributor to the mixture to see if you get a false inclusion? That sort of relatedness study, was that part of your validation?
Not as part of our STARMIX 2.5.11 validation. We had mixture profiles that contained like shared alleles, but not specifically family mixtures as part of a separate entity of some of the mixtures that we test.
And one last question, when, and I'm sorry, it might be in our materials, but when you decon, assuming a contributor, is that only after you've first compared the individual, like deconning it without any assumptions and comparing that person, seeing what their generated LR is before you then take it, or do you?
No, we don't run an LR first to confirm before we assume. We look for the amount of alleles that are present in the mixture, what peak height ratios are, and we make an assessment that way. We don't run the LR and like use that as a threshold to say whether we can include some or assume somebody or not.
But why not?
We never had that as part of our protocols. We still, when we did prior to STARMIX, when we were just doing binary deconvolutions as well, we would just look at the electropherograms and the different ELIMs that are available, and whether somebody reasonably assumed to be on something based on this is their vehicle, I'm expecting their alleles here. However, that was one of the things that we noted in the corrective action, was that they assumed on that, and that was in like an incorrect assumption based on somebody else looking at it and seeing like the peak height ratios were off. It just didn't make intuitive sense. So we don't do that with an LR, but we assess the profile in general against the sample type as well, like where the sample came from, if there's a reasonable assumption for that individual to be on there or not.
Did the reanalysis, how did it change the LR? Did you actually compare it with a person of interest?
In the second, after we corrected the, after you
corrected the deconning and.
I would have to go look at the report. I'm pretty sure we did, because we would have run that comparison. So I can look and see what the result would be. But if the mom is in there, I'm kind of going to expect that the LR from him would be also inclusionary in general.
Yeah, no, I just wondered how the LR changed from the first to second time. You're saying you never ran it with the assumption of two people. Is that right? Did the comparison, the LR generation with under the two people?
Right, we wouldn't have run an LR because we assumed him. So when we ran it as ran it as a two-person mixture, we wouldn't have run the LR.
Got it. Right.
When we ran the mother LR with the 2P, there was a 0. Yeah. So that's another sign something is wrong here.
Right, got it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Suffolk County Medical Examiner Toxicology Lab. The laboratory has notified DCJS and NAB of a case report provided to the customer with incorrect screening results. The screening results for THC were incorrectly reported as negative and only noticed by the analyst during the discussion with the district attorney's office. The paperwork was corrected and quantitative analysis was performed. An amended report was issued. All DWI screening batches were reviewed back to January of 2025. With no other issues identified. Retraining the analyst and the reviewer was completed. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Okay. For the Westchester County Department of Labs and Research, Division of Forensic Science, DCJS and NAB were provided additional information relating to an unexpected result of a trace proficiency test first discussed at the June meeting. The PT did not make it through technical review in the laboratory and therefore was deemed unsuccessful based on the laboratory's quality manual. It was determined that the procedure manual for impression cases was brief and that the examiner placed restrictions on the analysis that were not in the procedure. The manual has been updated and the examiner is undergoing retraining. The examiner had not performed casework for footwear impressions. Any questions for the laboratory? I see Aaron's hand up. We have the quality manager available virtually.
Hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, there I am. Yes, I can hear you guys.
Okay, good. Thank you for joining us. So just so I understand, there are two analysts that do these kind of impression evaluations. They were doing a PT. The PT requires a review because there's only two of them. They reviewed each other, and then they learned they had disagreed, one finding a level 1 association and one finding a level 3 association, and that the further investigation of why there was the discrepancy was that one of the analysts was imposing kind of stricter criteria for these RACs, these randomly acquired characteristics. And the protocol that the office follows doesn't have that same level of strictness, essentially. They were saying we only note them if they were obvious, big, or significant, whereas the protocol allowed for, I guess, non-obvious, non-big, or non-significant. So the question, if that first, is that all right? Or did I miss anything?
Right, basically. I mean, they did update the manual for that whole procedure. So it also just didn't have a lot of information. It went from about 2 pages to about 7 pages for them to, make the observations for the comparisons.
Well, so this might be then helpful to understand both the update and the initial distinction. What was the basis for the standard in the protocol, and what was the basis for the standard that the analyst imposed that was different? Does that make sense? Like, what was the scientific basis, or why did the protocol have its standard? Like, on what science, or what was it resting on, and then what was the analyst resting on?
So I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're asking, but the analyst that was making the conclusions, because there was a change to the manual by adding in the level 1 associations, level 2, level 3, that was fairly new. So it seems as though the analyst was putting these restrictions because in order to call it a level 1, you want to be, thoroughly sure that these racks were present. So it seems that's why they were putting the restrictions on themselves.
Right. So, well, let me ask the last question, and then maybe I can backtrack. So what changes were made to the manual? Like, which of these two views is predominant now in the manual?
Well, I think it was more the updates had to do with how you go through making the comparison, not when to deem something. Like, there were no, I don't think the updates had to do with a level 1, level 2, level 3. It had to do with doing the actual comparison and making the notes. So the distinctions between level 1 and level 3, those were still the same, but it also has to do with the fact that we did deem this root cause more based on the training that the analyst did receive, and the fact that there hasn't been, there were no cases that were done, real cases that were done where comparisons needed to be made. So
right.
So it was kind of a combination of the manual update in addition with not having real cases for comparison and just the fact that that level 1 associations, level 2, so you know, the levels, that was also new.
But just so I understand, right? So like, for instance, on page, I think 256 of our materials, it said the analyst placed restrictions that are not in the procedure. These included only looking for big, obvious, significant racks, not identifying it as a rack unless it's visible in the actual footwear item, as well as at least one impression made by that item, and limiting comparison to racks identified in that initial phase. And so to me, I guess, let me just say, state forthrightly, like those all seem like reasonable limitations to me. I will forthrightly say I'm a skeptic of this discipline. I frankly am glad to see there's only been 4 cases in which it's been done since 2020, because to me, there isn't sufficient support for this as a discipline. But recognizing that it's being done, I want to understand why restrictions that strike me as like obvious, good ones, seem to be the ones that were discarded. And, or like, what's problematic about the restrictions that were put on, and what support there is for not following those restrictions. Does that make sense?
Okay, so I'm not sure it makes sense, except like, so the other analysts that brought this to our attention, you know, both analysts were done with their proficiency test. So the other analysts that brought it to our attention, there were those restrictions they didn't have those restrictions, and they actually, you know, identified several racks to deem it a level 1, which in the end, in the PT and the results, it was correct. So I don't know if it is something based on more experience, because the other analysts probably did see some more, you know, some more cases and racks based on the experience. So I don't know if that's answering your question.
Yeah, maybe just the last way to put it is, when the manual says like, what what standards are being followed in the protocol that make that analyst's analysis correct? Does that make sense? Like, where are the standards coming from that are in the protocol?
Standards coming from, I mean, I would, that's more of a technical question. I would probably have to follow up for you, because I can't answer that, where the standards are coming from. I mean, in terms of the actual technical procedure, that's something I guess I would have to ask someone, you know, a technical analyst to answer that.
Okay, that's understandable.
Yeah.
That would be helpful. Thank you. But you obviously should have time to do that.
We can get back to you on what standards they're using to follow, but I mean, yeah, I'm not sure. I would have to get back to you.
Yeah, that would be great. That makes perfect sense. And it's just, again, so that I can understand better how the, I don't want to do is penalize an analyst who to me was taking a conservative approach, which is justified in this discipline, you know, and I certainly wouldn't want to level down to a less conservative approach unless it is clearly scientifically supported. And that's what I'm trying to understand by asking this question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the quality manager?
I do have one question. Thank you for joining us. So I can appreciate working in a discipline where there's only 2 analysts that are qualified in that discipline. So, you know, I recognize that it's best if 2 are taking the PT, they both completed, and then they tech review each other's work. I guess I'm just interested in understanding, does your lab have a process, or how do you go about determining if there's a significant technical error identified during the tech review, if it's a PT and you haven't submitted it yet for results? That's got to be challenging. It's difficult. So I'm just curious what your process is to get to that point where you say, you know what, this is a significant technical error and we're not going to submit this.
Right. So this is a fairly new part in our manual. And it did take a little while for us to determine whether or not we considered this significant. but the fact that it had to do with like the actual conclusion. So it was also tricky because the analyst that was doing the review was also doing like a verification. So had this been a real case, this test would have this case would have gone for a verification first, and then it would have gone for a tech review. So they had to tie in the verification and the tech review at the same time. So this analyst that brought it to our attention said that they felt that there were enough racks there to deem it a level 1. So we felt that since it had to do with what the conclusion would be, that's why we deemed it significant. And this was as a result of some discussions we had with our accreditation manager, in that because all of our PTs are tech reviewed before we send them to the vendor, having an analyst fix it before it gets sent out, then are we really testing the analyst? So that's why we started that. And it's very new. This is the first incident that we've had to, I guess, determine.
Sure, I agree. I completely understand where you're coming from, and
Yeah.
you wouldn't have an analyst fix, right, before they
Right.
submit. I'm just curious why you chose not to submit and see what the results were. So again, understanding it's a small discipline with few, so I'm just curious what the process is there.
Right. So like I said, when the analyst brought it to our attention, we decided not to submit it because, they then did go back and the suggestion was to go back and review it. And since there still were no additional identifying racks identified, then we then determined we should not submit it because we felt as though we needed to do a further investigation to determine what the issue was. So, I mean, it wasn't a matter of like they forgot paperwork, like we wouldn't call that a significant error. I don't know if that's answering your question.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions for the laboratory?
Just one. You mentioned cognitive bias in your investigation of the analyst who, I guess, determined it was inconclusive or whatnot. What can you just say more about what was the cognitive bias?
That the comparisons, like additional comparisons, or I should say, any additional observations were being made when it was being made with the known, which in this discipline is something you can do as long as it's documented along the way when the observations are being made. So that's all that was about.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Up next, we have the Westchester County Department of Labs and Research, Division of Forensic Toxicology. BCJS and A&B have been notified of the laboratory accepting an improperly sealed blood kit for testing due to the unavailability of the designated technician. The toxicologist accepted a blood kit into the laboratory with an inappropriate seal. While the outer container did not meet lab policy, the inner box, which holds the evidence itself, was properly sealed. All personnel will be retrained on the procedure for accepting and handling evidence, and kits will be checked weekly for 1 month to verify the proper seals. The QA manager will also perform.
You're still here?
Wait a minute,
Hang on, you're live.
Oh, it's Patty. Hold on a second. I think they told me.
Yeah, no.
Let's see how fast they got.
All right. Anyway, the quality manager will be performing a quarterly audit to monitor seals and ensure compliance. Are there any questions for our lab director? Hearing none. Last lab, Yonkers. The Yonkers Police Department Forensic Science Laboratory has one issue. They've notified of lost evidence. while performing a latent print development on an item of evidence in the fume hood. The item was pulled into the fume hood and not able to be retrieved. Are there any questions for the lab? We have heard this before, yeah.
It's happened, yeah.
It's happened to any biologist.
Yeah. Not new.
Yeah.
Okay, so hearing none, that concludes our formal agenda items. Just thank you for all of your participation today. Just a quick item, just a sort of a late shout out. Last week was National Forensic Science Week, so I'd like to thank all the commission members and our labs for supporting the high quality forensic science that happens here in New York State. Appreciate your dedication.
Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, the next meeting will be on December 12th. Location to be determined. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second, Bev, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh.